I remember growing up, I always wanted more moves, more things to learn, more chord changes. And then as I progressed and matured as a musician, I realized I could do less with more with less. And in the day of the MIDI keyboard writers and the piano roll writers, I noticed they're not getting a lot of material out of very few chords. And that's why exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use D mixolydian flat 6, okay? And I'm only going to use 3 chords out of this whole thing. The 1, the 2 half diminished, and the 7 chord, which would be C, okay? So what I'm going to do is create a little melody with this and take it to notation, then come back with this. And maybe jump upwards as if I'm thinking like a different group. Let's say woodwinds, trading off, low, high. So I'm going to go notate that and harmonize it real quick. So here we go. Now, the one thing you'll notice about this, there's no non-chord tones, but it sounds very independent, okay? I'll hit play in a second. Notation playback isn't the greatest in the world because it's very stiff sounding. So, but we're just putting an idea across and only using 3 chords. Okay. I harmonize that melody. Here's the playback with the notation program. Okay. So, you notice that there's walking movement. There's let me play it real slow. These are just 2 chords alternating between each other. Now finally the C chord. It sounds really strange slow, I know that. But I'm doing it slow intentionally to show that the same harmonic scheme happens when I jumped up, except the melody changed. Okay, only 3 chords in there, but it sounds like a lot of movement, and there's way more than there is. But playing the outside voices, because of the use of inversions, it sounds like it closes in on itself like that, and the opposite kind of motion, as if it's 2 independent lines. So let's go ahead and listen back to it. Sorry about notation playback. The thing with notation playback is it's very stiff sounding. I realize that, but we're just showing a general idea and how to stretch an idea, and by literally using inversions. And here's a good way to think about this. We live in the day of the MIDI keyboard writer and the piano roll writers, and what I notice is that they tend to think in terms of verticalness. Okay, and that's a good way to put this. Verticalness, meaning you're thinking in terms of chord stacks vertically. But if you start thinking in the terms of chords horizontally, okay, the line of the chord horizontally, it'll change your viewpoint. And that's one of the best pieces of advice somebody has ever given me. Is somebody told me once, start thinking more in terms of the horizontal plane. Because when I first started to orchestrate my own stuff, I started to he said it's very pianistic and everything's like a piano part, and I saw what he meant after a while. And after I started to experiment with this kind of horizontal thinking, even just using chord tones, everything started to sound independent, even with no non-chord tones. Ironically, this is why you study stuff like Bach chorales and, just that 4-part writing and all that, is because you stop looking at things as a vertical stack and you start looking at each line independently. And that's why I would suggest to anybody, regardless of what they're writing now, is to actually start studying that stuff. Regardless of the style you even play, if you want to get into film scores or whatever, this is something you should probably do, because when you start thinking in terms, this is a good way. I'm going to start using this now. Horizontal lines instead of vertical stacks. You may suddenly find yourself stretching 8 bars of just 3 chords using horizontal thinking and no non-chord tones, but it sounds like there's a lot of motion. And the reason is because I'm no longer thinking in that terms of the vertical stacks, and I'm thinking, or piano playing or piano roll or whatever, looking at everything as like a huge vertical stack. I'm thinking in that horizontal plane. Thus, you could still use chords and just chords and make it sound like there's a lot of independence and motion. And again, get more musical ideas with less material. That's what this video is about. Start thinking about that aspect of music. Maybe you don't need a new move right now. Maybe you need to stretch what you already know.